Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Without further ado, returning to The Picture of Dorian Gray as read by Lord Naren White. Yes, answered Lord Henry, dreamily. The costume the costume of our day is detestable. It is so somber, so depressing. Sin the only element left in modern life. You really must not say things like that before Dorian, Harry. Before which Dorian? The one who is pouring out tea for us, or the one in the picture? Before either. I should like to come to the theatre with you, Lord Henry, said the lad. Then you shall come. Then you shall come. And you will come too, Basil, won't you? I can't, really. I would sooner not. I have a lot of work to do. Well then, you and I will go alone, Mr. Gray. I should like that awfully. Basil Hallward bit his lip and walked over, cup in hand, to the picture. I will stay with the real Dorian, he said, sadly. Is it the real Dorian? Cried the original of the portrait, running across to him. Am I really like that? Yes, you are wonderful just like that. How wonderful, Basil! At least you like it in appearance, but it will never alter, said Hallward. That is something. What a fuss people make about fidelity, murmured Lord Henry. And, after all, it is purely a question for physiology. It has nothing to do with our own will. It is either an unfortunate accident or an unpleasant result of temperament. Young men want to be faithful and are not. Old men want to be faithless and cannot. That is all one can say. Don't go to the theatre tonight, Dorian, said Hallward. Stop and dine with me. I can't, really. Why? Because I have promised Lord Henry to go with him. He won't like you better for keeping your promises. He always breaks his own. I beg you not to go. Dorian Gray laughed and shook his head. I entreat you. The lad hesitated, and looked over at Lord Henry, who was watching them from the tea-table with an amused smile. I must go, Basil, he answered. Very well, said Hallward, and he walked over and laid his cup down on the tray. It is rather late, and as you have to dress, you had better lose no time. Goodbye, Harry. Goodbye, Dorian. Come and see me soon. Come tomorrow. Certainly. You won't forget. No, of course not. And Harry? Yes, Basil? Remember what I asked you when in the garden this morning? I have forgotten it. I trust you. I wish I could trust myself, said Lord Henry, laughing. Come, Mr. Gray, my hansom is outside, and I can drop you at your own place. Goodbye, Basil. It has been a most interesting afternoon. As the door closed behind them, Hallward flung himself down on a sofa, and a look of pain came into his face. Chapter 3. One afternoon, a month later, Dorian Gray was reclining in a luxurious armchair in the little library of Lord Henry's house at Curzon Street. It was, in its way, a very charming room, with its high-panelled wainscoting of olive-stained oak, its cream-coloured frieze and ceiling of raised plaster work, and its brick dust felt carpet-strewn with long, fringed silk Persian rugs. On a tiny satinwood table stood a statuette by Clodion, and beside it lay a copy of Les Saintes Nouvelles, bound for Margaret of Valois by Clovis Eve, and powdered with the gilt daisies that the Queen had selected for her device. Some large blue china jars, filled with parrot tulips, were ranged on the mantel-shelf, and through the small leaded panes of the window streamed the apricot-coloured light of a summer's day in London. Lord Henry had not come in yet. He was always late on principle, his principle being that punctuality is the thief of time. So the lad was looking rather sulky, as with listless fingers he turned over the pages of an elaborately illustrated edition of Manon Lescaut that he had found in one of the bookcases. The formal, monotonous ticking of the Louis XIV clock annoyed him. Once or twice he thought of going away. At last he heard a light step outside, and the door opened. "How late of you, Harry," he murmured. "I am afraid it is not Harry, Mr. Gray," said a woman's voice. He glanced round and rose to his feet. "I beg your pardon, you thought it was my husband. It is only his wife. You must let me introduce myself. I know you quite well by your photographs. I think my husband has got 27 of them." "Not 27, Lady Henry? Well, 26 then. And I saw you with him the other night at the opera." She laughed nervously as she spoke, and watched him with her vague forget-me-not eyes. She was a curious woman, whose dresses always looked as if they had been designed in a rage and put on in a tempest. She was always in love with somebody, and as her passion was never returned, she had kept all her illusions. She tried to look picturesque, but only succeeded in being untidy. Her day was Victoria, and she had a perfect mania for going to church. "That was at Lohengrin, Lady Henry, I think. Yes, it was at dear Lohengrin. I like Wagner's music better than any other music. It is so loud that one can talk the whole time without people hearing what one says. This is a great advantage. Don't you think so, Mr. Gray?" The same nervous staccato laugh broke from her thin lips, and her fingers began to play with the long paper knife. Dorian smiled and shook his head. "I'm afraid I don't think so, Lady Henry. I never talk during music, at least during good music. If one hears bad music, it is one's duty to drown it by conversation." "Ah, that is one of Harry's views, isn't it, Mr. Gray? But you must not think I don't like good music. I adore it, but I am afraid of it. It makes me too romantic. I've simply worshipped pianists, two at a time, sometimes. I don't know what it is about them. Perhaps it is that they are foreigners. They all are, aren't they? Even those that are born in England become foreigners after a time, don't they? It is so clever of them, and such a compliment to art. Makes it quite cosmopolitan, doesn't it? You have never been to any of my parties, have you, Mr. Gray? You must come. I can't afford orchids, but I spare no expense in foreigners. They make one's rooms look so picturesque. But here's Harry. Harry, I came in to look for you, to ask you something. I forget what it was, and I found Mr. Gray here. We have had such a pleasant chat about music. We have quite the same views. No, I think our views are quite different. But he has been more pleasant. I'm so glad I've seen him." "I'm charmed, my love, quite charmed," said Lord Henry, elevating his dark crescent-shaped eyebrows and looking at them both with an amused smile. "So sorry I am late, Dorian. I went to look after a piece of old brocade in Wardour Street and had to bargain for hours for it. Nowadays people know the price of everything and the value of nothing." "I'm afraid I must be going," exclaimed Lady Henry after an awkward silence with her silly sudden laugh. "I have promised to drive with the Duchess. Goodbye, Mr. Gray. Goodbye, Harry. You are dining out, I suppose?" "So am I. Perhaps I shall see you at the Lady Thornberry's." "I dare say, my dear," said Lord Henry, shutting the door behind her, as she fitted out of the room, looking like a bird of paradise that had been out in the rain, leaving a faint odor of patchouli behind her. Then he shook hands with Dorian Gray, lit a cigarette, and flung himself down on the sofa. "Never marry a woman with straw-colored hair, Dorian," he said, after a few puffs. "Why, Harry?" "Because they are so sentimental." "But I like sentimental people." "Never marry at all, Dorian. Men marry because they are tired. Women because they are curious. Both are disappointing." We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel.
Light be with you all. Take care. And thanks again.